The spotlight illuminates three young men on stage, their voices soaring through the concert hall in perfect harmony. The audience erupts in thunderous applause, tears streaming down faces moved by the power of their performance. From the outside, it appears effortless. Three gifted tenors living a dream that most can only imagine. But behind the perfectly pressed tuxedos, the charming smiles and the standing ovations, Piero Barone, Gianluca Ginobili, and Ignazio Boschetto of Il Volo carried burdens that would have broken lesser spirits. Their journey to becoming international opera pop sensations is painted with glamour and success. But the canvas holds darker shades that fans rarely glimpsed. Shades of exhaustion, doubt, sacrifice, and silent suffering that tested not just their voices, but their very souls. When three teenagers from different corners of Italy stepped onto the stage of Ti lascio una canzone in 2009, nobody could have predicted the phenomenon they would become. Piero, with his powerful tenor and natural stage presence from Naro, Sicily. Gianluca, the sensitive soul from Roseto degli Abruzzi, with a voice that could melt hearts. And Ignazio, the charismatic baritone from Bologna, whose warmth radiated beyond the footlights. They were just boys, with extraordinary gifts and impossible dreams. Their rendition of O Sole Mio didn't just win a television competition. It launched them into a stratosphere few artists ever reach. Within months, they were recording albums, performing for dignitaries, and touring the world. They went from studying for school exams to sharing stages with legends like Barbara Streisand and Placido Domingo. The whirlwind seemed magical, the kind of Cinderella story that inspires millions. But Cinderella stories often gloss over the blisters from the glass slippers. The weight of expectations settled on their young shoulders like lead cloaks. At ages 14, 15, and 16, they suddenly represented not just themselves, but an entire genre, a cultural tradition, and the hopes of a nation that saw them as ambassadors of Italian musical heritage to the world. Italy has produced countless legendary voices, Pavarotti, Bocelli, Caruso, names that echo through history with reverence. Now, three teenagers were being measured against these giants. The comparisons came swift and merciless. Critics who had spent decades studying operatic technique dissected every note, every breath, every performance with surgical precision. Some praised their raw talent and fresh approach to classical crossover. Others dismissed them as manufactured pop stars masquerading in formal wear, questioning whether their voices possessed the depth and training worthy of the repertoire they performed. For Piero, Gianluca, and Ignazio, this criticism cut deep. They weren't seasoned professionals with decades of experience and thick skin hardened by years in the industry. They were teenagers who still remembered what it felt like to be ordinary kids dreaming in their bedrooms. Piero later reflected in interviews about those early days, describing nights lying awake wondering if they were good enough, if they deserved the opportunities being handed to them, if tomorrow would be the day the world realized they were imposters. The psychological phenomenon known as imposter syndrome typically affects high achievers who doubt their accomplishments, and it gripped these young men with particular ferocity. They couldn't talk about it with most people. How do you explain to friends back home that performing in front of thousands feels terrifying when it looks so glamorous? How do you admit vulnerability when everyone expects you to be confident and grateful every moment? The scrutiny extended beyond their vocal abilities. Suddenly, everything was analyzed: their fashion choices, their English pronunciation, their social media posts, their friendships, their rumored relationships. Teenage years are already a minefield of self-consciousness and identity formation. Imagine navigating that under the unblinking eye of international media and millions of fans. Every awkward moment, every slip of the tongue, every bad photograph became permanent internet fodder. Gianluca, naturally more introverted and sensitive, found this aspect particularly challenging. He spoke years later about the anxiety of knowing that a single mistake could be captured, shared, and criticized by countless strangers who felt entitled to judge every aspect of his existence. The pressure to maintain a perfect public image while still figuring out who they were as individuals created a dissonance that gnawed at their sense of self. But perhaps no challenge proved more physically demanding than the music itself. Il Volo's repertoire isn't the kind you can phone in or perform half-heartedly. These aren't simple pop songs. They're demanding classical and operatic pieces that require technical precision, breath control, and power that can take trained opera singers decades to master. Songs like Granada, Nessun Dorma, and Il Mondo demand everything a vocalist can give. The human voice is an instrument, but unlike a violin or piano, it lives inside the body, subject to every physical and emotional fluctuation the body experiences. When you're tired, it shows. When you're stressed, it tightens. When you're sick or haven't slept, the notes that soared effortlessly yesterday become impossible mountains to climb today. The touring schedule Il Volo maintained would exhaust seasoned performers twice their age. During their peak touring years, they performed over 100 shows annually, crisscrossing continents with barely time to adjust to time zones before stepping on stage again. Their bodies ran on fumes disguised as adrenaline. Piero developed nodules on his vocal cords in the early years, a terrifying diagnosis for any singer, but particularly devastating for someone whose entire identity and career depends on their voice. Nodules form from vocal strain and overuse, essentially calluses on the delicate tissue of the vocal folds. For weeks, he faced the possibility that his voice might never fully recover, that the career that had barely begun might already be ending. The prescribed treatment, complete vocal rest, meant no talking, no singing, no communication except through writing. For someone as naturally expressive and social as Piero, the isolation was psychological torture layered atop the physical fear. Gianluca battled recurring respiratory infections that turned singing into agony. Imagine trying to execute perfect breath control and support when every inhalation feels like knives in your lungs, when your sinuses are inflamed and your head pounds with pressure. Yet cancelling shows rarely felt like an option. Thousands of people had bought tickets months in advance, travelled distances, arranged their lives around seeing Il Volo. Promoters had invested massive sums. The entire machine of their career depended on them showing up, being brilliant, making it look easy. So they showed up, pumped themselves with medication, and delivered performances that left audiences in tears of joy while they battled tears of pain backstage. After one particularly brutal performance during a severe illness, Gianluca collapsed in his dressing room, his body finally overriding his willpower's insistence that he could push through anything. Ignazio struggled with the physical toll of a performer's lifestyle in different ways. The irregular sleep patterns, the endless travel, the rich foods at promotional dinners and events, it all took a toll on his health and energy. He gained weight, which brought another wave of public commentary and body shaming that crushed his confidence. In interviews given years later, he spoke candidly about that period, describing how he would avoid mirrors, how he felt like he was disappointing fans by not looking the part of a leading man, how the criticism about his appearance affected his mental health more deeply than any musical critique ever had. The pressure to maintain a certain image while simultaneously maintaining the exhausting touring and recording schedule felt impossible. When he finally decided to prioritize his health, embarking on a significant weight loss journey, it required discipline that extended far beyond diet and exercise. It required rebuilding his entire relationship with his body and self-image. The vocal care regimen required to maintain their instruments became a source of constant anxiety and restriction. While their peers could stay out late, drink, smoke, party through the night, Il Volo had to be monks in comparison. Alcohol dries the vocal folds. Smoke damages them. Late nights lead to fatigue that affects vocal quality. Screaming at football matches or in loud clubs could mean hoarseness that lasts for days. They had to hydrate constantly, sleep adequately, avoid air conditioning that dried their throats, stay away from sick people, monitor every physical sensation for signs their voices weren't at peak condition. It sounds manageable until you realize it means saying no to normal young adult experiences constantly. It means isolation from peers who don't understand why you can't just relax and have fun. It means carrying the knowledge that a single night of carelessness could damage your career permanently. The emotional and mental toll of this lifestyle compounded over time. Depression crept in during the darkest periods, a shadow that followed them through hotel rooms in cities whose names blurred together. Anxiety attacks struck at unpredictable moments, sometimes right before performances, heart racing, palms sweating, feeling like they couldn't breathe, let alone sing. They couldn't talk openly about these struggles for years because mental health, particularly for young men, particularly in the public eye, carried stigma that threatened to be seen as weakness. Fans wanted to believe their idols were happy, confident, living the dream. Admitting to struggling with depression or anxiety risked seeming ungrateful for opportunities millions would die for. So they smiled for the cameras, signed the autographs, gave the interviews where they said all the right things about how blessed and happy they were, then went back to hotel rooms and stared at ceilings, wondering how long they could keep this up. The strain on personal relationships cut deeply. While they traveled the world, their families lived normal lives back in Italy, celebrating birthdays and holidays and everyday moments without them. Piero missed his grandmother's final years, something he spoke about with visible pain, his voice breaking as he described the guilt of being on the other side of the world, chasing dreams while she grew older without him. Gianluca watched friends from his childhood build local lives, get married, have children, establish roots, while he existed in a state of perpetual transit, never quite belonging anywhere, seeing his family in brief windows between tours that never felt long enough. Ignazio struggled with maintaining friendships when every conversation had to be scheduled around time zones and packed calendars, when he couldn't be present for the important moments in his loved ones' lives because he was on stage somewhere performing for strangers. Romantic relationships proved nearly impossible to sustain. How do you build intimacy and trust when you're gone 10 months out of the year? When any person you date faces immediate public scrutiny and invasion of privacy? When the tabloids speculate about every interaction, twist innocent friendships into scandals, and create drama where none exists? All three men experienced heartbreak intensified by the circumstances of their careers. Relationships that might have flourished in normal conditions withered under the pressure of distance, public attention, and the relentless demands of their schedule. The loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people, constantly yet feeling deeply alone, became a familiar companion. They would stand on stage before thousands of adoring fans, receive standing ovations, feel the rush of that love and energy, then return to empty hotel rooms in the small hours and feel the hollowness underneath it all. There were moments when quitting felt like the only logical option. During one particularly brutal stretch, the details of which were shared years later in a candid interview, Gianluca reached a breaking point. Exhausted physically, emotionally drained, struggling with his mental health, he confided in Piero and Ignazio that he didn't know if he could continue. The confession broke open a floodgate for all three of them, revealing that each had been struggling privately, each believing the others were handling things better, each trying to be strong for the group while crumbling internally. That vulnerable conversation, conducted in the back of a tour bus somewhere between cities, became a turning point. They realized they didn't have to carry their burdens alone, that their brotherhood meant sharing not just the triumphs, but the struggles. The touring life itself was a masterclass in sacrifice and endurance. While audiences saw the polished 90-minute performances, they didn't see the 18-hour travel days that preceded them. The 4 a.m. wake-up calls to catch flights, the endless sound checks in venues with poor acoustics where they had to adjust their technique on the fly, the meet and greets where they plastered on smiles and warmth while running on fumes, the promotional appearances where they were expected to be charming and energetic while functioning on 3 hours of sleep. Behind every performance was a grueling infrastructure of logistics, obligations, and physical demands that would exhaust anyone. The dietary challenges alone tested their willpower. Performing at their level requires specific nutrition, proper protein for muscle support, hydration, foods that don't produce excess mucus or acid reflux before singing. But touring meant eating whatever was available, often fast food grabbed between venues, catering that was heavy and greasy, or nothing at all when schedules ran too tight. Their digestive systems rebelled. Their energy crashed. They pushed through anyway because the show must go on, always, regardless of how they felt. Ignacio later joked, though the pain underneath was evident, that they knew every truck stop bathroom between major cities across multiple continents. A crude reality of maintaining bodily functions while living on buses and in constant motion. The psychological impact of never being home, never having privacy, never being able to move through the world as a normal person wore them down. Gianluca described the surreal experience of feeling like a prisoner of his own success, wanting to walk through a market, sit in a cafe, explore a city they were visiting, but being unable to without being mobbed. The attention was flattering initially, but it became suffocating. Even in their downtime, they couldn't truly relax. There was always someone watching, recording, ready to share their location or actions with the world. The loss of anonymity meant the loss of freedom in ways they hadn't anticipated as teenagers just excited to sing. Tour buses and hotels became their homes, but they were homes without the comfort and stability that word implies. Everything was temporary, sterile, interchangeable. They would wake up confused about which city they were in, what country, what day of the week. The disorientation fed into the sense of being unmoored from reality. Piero spoke about the strange sensation of feeling most at home on stage, in those moments when muscle memory took over and singing was the only thing that made sense, the only thing that felt solid and real in a life that had become surreal. Yet through all these struggles, the bond between Piero, Gianluca, and Ignacio became their anchor. What started as three talented individuals became something more profound, a genuine brotherhood forged in shared hardship. They learned each other's vulnerabilities, the signs when one was struggling, how to support without words when words were too hard. When Piero faced vocal issues, Gianluca and Ignacio shouldered extra weight during performances, adjusting harmonies and arrangements to take pressure off him. When Gianluca battled depression, Piero and Ignacio became his reasons to get out of bed, showing up at his door to make sure he ate, forcing him to laugh when he wanted to isolate. When Ignacio struggled with self-image and confidence, Piero and Gianluca became mirrors reflecting back his worth, challenging every negative thought with fierce loyalty. They developed rituals before performances, private moments of connection and mutual encouragement. A specific handshake, words only they understood, glances that communicated volumes. These small traditions became sacred, reminders that they were in this together, that no one faced anything alone. In interviews, all three have identified this brotherhood as the reason they survived the impossible pressures. Without each other, they openly admit, none would have made it. The career would have ended years ago, casualties of burnout, vocal damage, or mental collapse. But together, they could carry what would crush individuals. Their support system extended beyond each other to include dedicated team members, family who provided grounding despite the distance, and eventually vocal coaches and therapists who helped them develop healthier coping mechanisms and techniques. Learning to set boundaries, to prioritize their health over constant productivity, to say no when necessary. These skills didn't come naturally, but had to be painfully learned through trial and error and near disasters. The transition from teenagers eager to please everyone to men who understood their own limits represented crucial growth that saved their careers and quite possibly their lives. The turning points came gradually, not as a single moment, but as an accumulation of choices to keep going despite wanting to quit. After Piero's vocal scare, they made the collective decision to take more control over their schedule, to insist on adequate rest between performances, even when promoters pushed back. After Gianluca's health crisis, they committed to better supporting each other's physical and mental wellness, checking in more consistently, encouraging professional help when needed. After Ignazio's struggles with public perception, they worked together to craft a more authentic public image, being more honest with fans about the realities behind the glamour, humanizing themselves in ways that released pressure and invited genuine connection rather than worship. These decisions had professional consequences. Some opportunities were lost. Some promoters pushed back against their new boundaries. Some fans criticized them for reducing performance frequency or being less available. But these were prices worth paying for sustainability. They learned that a career that burns out in 5 years serves no one, while a career built on longevity and authenticity creates something meaningful. The shift from sprinting to marathon running, from seeking constant validation to building something lasting, marked their maturation as artists and individuals. Their music deepened as their experiences accumulated. The emotion in their performances became richer, more nuanced, informed by genuine suffering and joy rather than just technical excellence. When Gianluca sang about love and loss, audiences could hear the weight of real heartbreak in his voice. When Piero delivered powerful crescendos, the triumph carried echoes of battles fought and won offstage. When Ignazio's warmth radiated through his baritone, it reflected hard-won self-acceptance and resilience. The struggles that nearly destroyed them ultimately enhanced their artistry in ways that purely technical training never could. They became not just skilled singers, but genuine artists with something meaningful to communicate. Fan reactions to learning about these struggles years later were overwhelmingly supportive. Many expressed guilt for contributing to unrealistic expectations, for demanding endless content and access without considering the human cost. Others shared their own struggles with mental health, vocal issues, or career pressures, finding validation and connection in Il Volo's honesty. The vulnerability strengthened rather than weakened the bond between artists and audience. Fans who had loved the music gained deeper appreciation for the men behind the voices, understanding that every performance represented not just talent, but triumph over genuine adversity. The COVID-19 pandemic, while devastating globally, provided Il Volo with something they desperately needed: forced rest. When the world shut down and touring became impossible, they finally stopped moving. The silence was initially terrifying after years of constant motion, but it became healing. They returned to their families for extended periods for the first time in over a decade. They rediscovered hobbies and interests beyond music. They slept properly, ate home-cooked meals, remembered what it felt like to be just Piero, Gianluca, and Ignazio rather than Il Volo. This reset, though born from tragedy, saved them from a burnout trajectory that seemed inevitable. When they returned to performing, they came back changed, more boundaried, more intentional, more determined to sustain their careers for the long term, rather than burning bright and fast. Their resilience throughout these trials speaks to something fundamental about human endurance and the power of purpose. They could have quit dozens of times with legitimate reasons. Instead, they chose to stay, to fight, to adapt and evolve. That choice wasn't made once, but thousands of times. Every morning they woke up exhausted but got on the bus anyway. Every performance they delivered while sick or struggling. Every moment they supported each other through darkness. The glamorous image that drew fans initially became backed by substance, by genuine grit and determination that makes their success meaningful beyond the surface appeal. Looking at Il Volo today, now in their 30s with over 15 years of career behind them, the transformation is evident. They carry themselves differently, with confidence that comes from surviving what should have destroyed them. They speak more openly about mental health, encouraging young artists coming up to prioritize wellness over constant productivity. They advocate for vocal health education, sharing their experiences with nodules and strain to help others avoid similar damage. They've become not just performers, but mentors who understand intimately the costs of success and the importance of sustainability. The silent struggles they hid from fans for so long have become part of their story, not shameful secrets, but testaments to resilience. In sharing these experiences, they've given countless others permission to acknowledge their own hidden battles, to understand that struggle doesn't negate success, but enriches it, makes it real and relatable and human. The perfection that audiences saw on stage was always illusion. The truth was messy and difficult and required daily choices to persevere despite overwhelming obstacles. Their journey reminds us that success is rarely the straight line it appears from outside. Behind every triumph are failures, doubts, near disasters, and moments of wanting to give up. Behind every confident performance are hours of practice through pain, performances delivered while fighting physical and emotional agony, victories won against internal voices insisting they couldn't continue. The standing ovations and critical acclaim are real, but so are the tears shed alone in hotel rooms, the vocal exercises done through nodule pain, the anxiety attacks before stepping on stage, the homesickness that never fully fades. As fans, we often want our heroes unblemished, untouchable, existing in realms beyond normal human suffering. But Il Volo's story, the complete story including the silent struggles, offers something more valuable than perfect idols. It offers genuine inspiration rooted in authenticity. It shows that talent must be coupled with resilience, that dreams require sacrifice, that success demands price tags often hidden from public view. It demonstrates that brotherhood and support systems can carry us through impossible situations, that vulnerability strengthens rather than weakens, that the choice to continue despite overwhelming odds defines character more than any achievement ever could. The next time you see Piero, Gianluca, and Ignazio take the stage, watch with this knowledge tucked in your awareness. See not just the perfect harmonies and powerful voices, but the years of struggle that forged them. Recognize that every note carries weight beyond its musical value. It represents battles fought and won, breakdowns and breakthroughs, loneliness endured, and brotherhood sustained. The performance you witness is the tip of an iceberg, beautiful and impressive, but the vast majority of their journey remains beneath the surface, invisible but essential to everything you see and hear. Their story is still being written, still unfolding with each new album and tour and challenge faced. But the chapters already completed teach profound lessons about the human capacity to endure, to adapt, to find strength in community, and to choose meaning over comfort. Il Volo's silent struggles, now spoken, remind us that behind every success story are human beings with the same fears, doubts, and vulnerabilities we all carry. Their choice to keep singing, to keep showing up, to keep creating beauty despite the costs, that's where the real artistry lives, where inspiration transforms from abstract concept to lived example. And perhaps that's the most powerful performance of all. Not the ones delivered on stage, but the daily performance of choosing to continue when every reason to quit seems valid, choosing hope when despair seems easier, choosing together when isolation beckons. In these choices, made quietly and repeatedly over years, lies the true measure of their remarkable journey.